Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone, and the Western Conference is absolute chaos right now. You've got a juggernaut, you've got multiple surprises, some of the most disappointing teams in recent history, and a lot of trade rumors surrounding them, a lot of teams that are injured but are still fighting through them, one team that's maybe more injured than anybody I've ever seen at the bottom of the standings, and everything in between, including multiple legends who seem like they're on their way out, and a guy right now who's trying to break through into the top 5 conversation. It truly is a wild time in the West, and I made one of these videos breaking down basically the entire Eastern Conference a few days ago, and y'all loved it. And the more that I thought about it, the West may be even crazier, so I thought I'd go ahead and follow that up with one about the West. So I want to get into it, and I basically just want to talk about all the narratives and where we're at right now about halfway through the season. Of course, up at the top, we've got the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have kind of run away with this one seed. They are 33-6 right now, on pace to win right around 69 games. They've got the best defense in the NBA, one of the best defenses ever, and they're right behind the 96 or 97, one of those two Chicago Bulls teams, for the best net rating in a single season ever. And again, Chet Holmgren has hardly played this year. Shea, in my opinion, is the MVP right now. It seems like the betting odds and most people's opinions kind of align with me. He's just doing historic stuff, about to join Jordan as the only two guards to ever have 3 consecutive seasons of 30 plus points per game and shooting 50% or better from the field. Jalen Williams should be on an all-defensive team. This team is loaded top to bottom. And of course, as a Thunder fan, I've made multiple videos about this team throughout the season, so I won't spend too long on them, but I really don't think it's been internalized by a lot of people just how special this team is, and when Chet returns, how much more insane they could get. So my favorite team is killing it right now, and that was kind of expected. If you asked almost anybody going into the season, they were going to tell you that the Thunder would be the 1 seed in the West, but pretty much everything else felt like a mystery, and I'll let you know right now, my predictions for the standings look nothing like what they actually are at the moment. Starting with the Houston Rockets at the 2 seed. This was a popular pick. A lot of people thought Houston could be in for that jump. To me, I thought they were still like a year away. I didn't trust the consistency of some of their young players, and it has been inconsistent, but it's been enough. Their defense is one of the best in the NBA. I believe it's number 2 or right there in the conversation behind Oklahoma City. You've gotten some great play recently from Jalen Green, who continues to go through these stretches. At the end of last season, he's one of the most unstoppable scorers in the world. Starts this year and is terrible, and now he's on a heater again. Since the calendar turned over to 2025, he's racking up like 30 points per game on crazy efficiency. If he could somehow ever put this together consistently for an 82-game season, we're talking about one of the best scorers in the entire world, and honestly, that's exactly what Houston needs. This team is like one big-time scorer, one guy away from being a potential force in the Western Conference. Right now, I honestly have no idea how they'll fare in a playoff series because I don't trust their offense at all, but they are a lockdown defense. If they get the right matchup, I think they could win 1 series. I think 2 is just a lot to ask for an extremely young team in its first run into the playoffs, but even just getting into the playoffs, never mind winning a series, would be such a massive win for this Houston team, a squad that, again, I didn't have making it this year. I thought they'd be in the play-in. I believe I had them at the 10 spot, but ultimately expected them to miss. Instead, they're going to kick out one of the other squads who many people thought would be there instead. And they may be looking to take a star away from some of those teams they pushed down the standings. Today, there was a report that they're very interested in landing Devin Booker if the Suns decide to blow it up, and spoiler alert, I think that's coming sooner than later. So huge shout to Houston. They've been way better than I was expecting. They have blown my expectations completely out of the water. And right behind them is another team who is a massive question mark coming into the season, and that is the Memphis Grizzlies, because the big question was, could they stay healthy? Could they keep their top guys on the court? Because last year they couldn't for even a second, and that's been a recurring theme of this team throughout the John Morant era. And the answer has been no. They really have not been able to keep most guys on the court, but it still hasn't really mattered. John Morant has missed time. Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., a bunch of their role players like Marcus Smart and Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson, Zach Edey, basically anybody on this roster that you look at has probably missed at least a few games, and yet they're 26-15 at the 3rd seed in this Western Conference, and it's a testament to the overwhelming depth of this squad. I mean, it just feels like role players pop out of the blue for this team. Jalen Wells right now, who's a 2nd-round pick, is probably the front runner for Rookie of the Year at the moment. Scottie Pippen Jr. has become such a reliable backup point guard. Santi Aldama has been amazing for them. Jay Huff has been critical in that center rotation. John Morant is definitely not scoring the way that he typically does. He's kind of looked a little bit more to playmaking, and it still feels like he's finding his groove a little bit after missing basically all of last season, so I'm not really worried or anything like that. I think it's going to take some time, plus he dealt with a hip injury in the middle of this beginning portion of the season. So I think as the year goes on and by the time we get to the playoffs, we'll see a lot more of the Ja Morant that we're typically used to. I mean, tonight, even though it came after the whistle, so it didn't count, he dunked on Victor Wembanyama. So I think it's safe to say Ja Morant is still insane. Desmond Bane still trying to find his footing a little bit. And the best player this year has honestly been Jaren Jackson Jr., who should not only be an all-star lock, he should be in all NBA conversations, has really evolved as an offensive player, still a high-level defender. He's the guy that has really anchored them this entire season and has grown further than I thought he was going to this season. It's scary to think about what they could look like if they could get everybody out there in the court. And then that brings us to Denver at the 4 spot, who of course are led by Nikola Jokic, who is right now battling with Shea for the MVP. It's going to be one of those two guys. And the Nuggets have been very up and down this season. They've dealt with some injuries. They've dealt with very inconsistent play from the supporting cast. It's just nowhere near as deep of a team as it's been previously. Plus, Jamal Murray has really not put it together a ton so far this season. Now, I will say lately, we've been seeing more and more of the Jamal Murray that the Nuggets need. So if that continues to be a trend, that's huge. But probably the biggest storyline for them has been the emergence of Russell Westbrook. And of course, I'm a Thunder fan. Russ, one of my favorite players of all time, the guy that really helped me fall in love with basketball. And it's super cool to see the way that he and Jokic are bouncing off each other. Their two-man game has been one of the best in the NBA. And I remember coming into this season and at the beginning of the year, there were a lot of people saying that it was over for him, that his career was coming to an end, that Russ really didn't have a spot in the NBA anymore. And right now, he's been one of their most important players. One of the biggest reasons why they have survived all of the up and down chaos has been because of Russell Westbrook. And as a Russ fan, that's music to my ears. And I feel like NBA fans are recognizing that he's been playmaking well. He's such a smart cutter, and Jokic finds him in his spots. The two of them elevate each other's games. And so while the Nuggets, I don't know if they're this powerhouse contender, it's hard to really ever count them out because they've got the best player in the world and a supporting cast that when they heat up is still pretty terrifying. And that brings us to the LA teams at 5 and 6. And if you told me that Kawhi wouldn't play until like 30 plus games into the season and the Clippers would be ahead of the Lakers at the point of his return, I would have said you were insane. But that's the case. The Clippers are about half a game ahead of the Lakers right now, and a lot of that has been like James Harden playmaking at an extremely high level. Even though his efficiency is way down, he's still been setting up guys like Norman Powell, who should be talked about way more in this most improved player conversation. He's just become a completely different player. Like, one option Norman Powell never felt like something that would have been a reality this season, a guy that would have carried the Clippers until Kawhi came back, but he's still shooting 44% from 3, averaging 24 points per game. He's got an all-star case. I don't think he makes it, but he's been one of the craziest storylines of the entire season, and now Kawhi's back. The defense is crazy with Zubats and Derrick Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn. This is a really good team. If Kawhi ever gets back to the Kawhi Leonard that we're used to, we're suddenly talking about, surprise out of nowhere, one of the more scary teams in the Western Conference, which I didn't think was going to be the case. I felt like with Kawhi out to start the season, they would have tumbled down the standings and been fighting an uphill battle to even get back into the play-in or playoff race, and instead they might have home court advantage in the first round. Then we have the Lakers, who have been the definition of a roller coaster this season. The beginning of the year, they were back, 80s dropping like 30 a night, Braun's still playing well, the role players are stepping up, and it's like, hey, could this team be a force in the West? And then they were bad, and then they were back, and then they were bad, and they were back, and right now they've lost 3 out of the last 4. I really don't know where they're going to settle in the standings. I feel like it's probably somewhere around here, edge of the play-in tournament. I expect them to make another move. They made the DFS acquisition, trading D'Lo for him, and ultimately I think that's a move they had to make, and it was a good one. DFS hasn't done anything insane for the Lakers quite yet, but I like the fit there, and I think over time he's going to be a really big piece for them. Now it's just a question of what is the next move, because I do think there's something else coming before the deadline. They've got like Rui Hachimura's money, they have a pick that they can still deal, some other tradable contracts. Specifically, they need help at the big man spot, like Jakob Poeltl. I would love if they could land him. I don't know what Toronto's asking price is going to be, but I think that's a very intriguing acquisition, because so far this season, the big rotation has been like AD, Christian Koloko, and that's kind of it. So they got to bring in more pieces. Austin Reeves has had some crazy playmaking games recently since being moved to the point guard spot in the wake of the D'Lo trade. Yeah, there's not like a ton for me to say about the Lakers. I mean, they're not great. They're definitely not a contender, but they're not bad. They're kind of middle of the pack. I could see them winning a playoff series, but unless they make something drastic happen at the deadline, that's kind of it. But it's a much more enjoyable experience than it was last season, and I guess that's really all I can ask for with the way that this front office has really mismanaged a lot of their assets. And that brings us to the disappointing group of teams, from the Mavericks at 7 to the Timberwolves at 8, the Kings at 9, the Warriors at 10, and the Suns at 11. There's a lot to talk about. For the Mavericks, it's not been disappointing because of their play. It's been disappointing because nobody can stay on the court. Luka out for around a month with a calf injury. Kyrie Irving dealing with an injury recently. We've got Derek Lively recently suffering an ankle injury. Nobody can stay healthy. And just before everybody started to fall apart, they had rattled off a 7-game win streak. They were looking scary, and they just can't get their guys out there. Now, luckily for them, the conference is so close, and they've only fallen to the 7th seed despite being 2-8 in their last 10 games. So they're going to have plenty of time to make up ground because it sounds like Luka is supposed to be back before the All-Star break, and Kyrie recently returned. So I do still think they'll end up as like a top 4 or 5-ish seed in the West, and last year, as you saw, maybe that's all that they need. But I was really hoping we would see them continue to battle up the standings and be that force in the Western Conference that's clear they can be when they're healthy. They have just kind of been anything but that as of late. Also, it sucks that because of these missed games, Luka isn't eligible for postseason awards, so he can't make All-NBA teams, he can't be the MVP or anything like that, which I have said before, I hate that rule. I really feel like if a guy plays 60 games and is impactful enough, more impactful than a guy who played 66 games, the more impactful player should still get the recognition even though they didn't reach an arbitrary game mark. I know some people like the rule and push back on it, but I'm a firm believer that it's bad and that they should go ahead and get rid of it. A voter should be able to discern who is more impactful in what number of games. That's just my opinion, because I think Luka, even with only playing like 55, 60 games, is worthy of at least like an All-NBA second or a third team. But regardless, hopefully the Mavericks are able to get healthy soon. And behind them are the Timberwolves, who do not get the injury excuse. This team is kind of just a shell of themselves from last season. They've shown flashes of the old defensive squad, but they're very inconsistent, nowhere near the juggernaut they were last season. The offense is extremely clunky. The Julius Randle fit just isn't great with this team. They don't have good spacing, which really hurts Anthony Edwards, and he's publicly complained about that in post-game interviews. Now, he's also turned into one of the best shooters in the world, so that's a really big development, but he can't get downhill, and teams are willing to let a lot of the guys on this team just go ahead and shoot shots because they're not scared of them at all. It's rough, and it was clear, in my opinion, they were going to take a step back with bringing in Julius Randle instead of Cat, but I didn't think it would be this bad. I thought they'd be around like a 5 seed after fighting for the 1 seed last season, not currently a play-in team, and I think that's very possible that that's where they end the season at. I mean, right now, they're hardly ahead of some of the teams that are outside of the play-in tournament, so if things really started to fall down, and if for some reason Anthony Edwards ever missed time, I think this squad could legitimately end up in the lottery, and it just sucks because we got 1 year of one of the best Timberwolves teams ever, and immediately it's back down to like the play-in range. Then we've got the Golden State Warriors, who at one point were 12-3, and now they're 20-20, and before their win over the Timberwolves last night, they were getting below 500, and I believe I saw a stat that said that there's never been a team that started off 12-3 that was below 500 at any point in the season before. They've had a historic drop-off, and I mean, it was never going to be sustainable having Buddy Hield knock down like 50% of his threes, averaging like 20 points per game and playing a 12-man rotation. They were always going to drop off, but I didn't expect it to be this drastic, and they, in my opinion, they've got to get Steph Curry some help. I know he said in some interviews recently that he doesn't want the organization to mortgage their future, and Draymond Green said the same thing. But like, you have a top 10 player right around that in NBA history. You have the best player in your franchise history. Get this guy some help. Do something. I mean, you don't have to trade like all your pieces. Just add like one more decent player to this team, because I think right now on this pace, they probably won't end up making the playoffs. And at that point, Steph is reaching like his age 37 season. He's on the decline. I mean, he's still really good, but he's not the Steph we once used to know. I just want to see Steph get like 1 or 2 more chances at playing high-level competitive basketball, whether it's with Golden State or if it's with someone else. So they continue to try this 2 timeline thing, and to the surprise of nobody, it's not working. Then we have the Kings, who I have no idea what to make of. I thought firing Mike Brown was a mistake and that he was being scapegoated, and now they're 7-2 since they fired him. Maybe Doug Christie is just the GOAT coach. I don't know. I mean, he's playing Keon Ellis minutes, which is a big improvement over what Mike Brown was doing with Keon Ellis, which was banishing him to the shadow realm. They're kind of locked in more on defense. Malik Monk's been playing great since being moved to the starting lineup. The Kings are putting it together. I mean, they're 7-2. They went from 13-19 to now 20-20. They're pushing for a playoff spot, and really that's all you can ask for. I don't know if it's going to be enough to keep De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento long-term following those trade rumors that popped up before Mike Brown's firing, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because I never know what to expect with this team. I don't know what to make of Sacramento. They've easily been one of the biggest catalysts of the chaos in the West, joined by the Phoenix Suns, who actually made a trade today as I'm recording this video. They went ahead and traded Josh Okogie, a second-round pick, for Nick Richards from the Charlotte Hornets. This one was rumored a little bit, and I think it's going to help. I mean, the day before this, the game before, they got eviscerated on the boards by Onyeka Okongwu and the Atlanta Hawks. They benched Jusuf Nurkic recently. They've got one of the worst big rotations in the league, so Nick Richards is going to help, but it's still pretty weak overall, and they need to make more trades. The problem is, with this deal, they now only have 2 tradable picks for like the rest of time, and they still have the Bradley Beal contract. This to me shows that they're definitely not getting Jimmy Butler, because I don't think they would have given up a pick and made a move if the Jimmy Butler thing was a possibility, but I really just don't think anybody's going to take that Bradley Beal contract. Like I talked about earlier, there's now reports of the Rockets kind of feeling it out, being like, hey, what's going to happen with Devin Booker? And I'm sure there's a lot of teams monitoring Kevin Durant, and to me, it just feels like the Suns are kind of waiting around until eventually this team falls apart this summer, whether it's KD requesting a trade or Devin Booker starting to hint a little bit that, hey, I need more help, but there's no way to get more help on this team. They went all in. It didn't work. This team's just not very good. I don't know what's a bigger mistake, the Bradley Beal trade or the Jusuf Nurkic one, because neither one of them are working out whatsoever for this team. Yeah, they've probably been the biggest disappointment of the season. A lot of people thought they could turn it around and that they would make a big jump from last season till now. It's not been the case. Somehow, they're even worse. And then you get to the Spurs, who I would love to see make the playoffs. I really want to see Wemby in a playoff series. Every time we've seen him on a big stage, like on Christmas and MSG, he goes off. It's just kind of what he's wired to do. And he's already become like a top 6, 7, maybe even 5-ish player in the NBA right now. He's running away with depoy. We're not even having conversations about that. He's evolved tremendously as an offensive player. That 3-point shot has really come along. Wemby's a monster. I mean, we talk about GOAT trajectories. Wemby is very clearly on that. I think everybody knew he was going to be insane year 2. I didn't expect him to be like a consensus all-NBA first-team guy, which he's going to be. So Wemby's been insane. There's just, a need for more help on this team. I think sooner than later, they should try to get him another co-star, because having Wemby on a rookie contract is one of the greatest assets in NBA history. I would try and take advantage of that and add a more expensive player when you can. But I like the way some of these young players have been developing, like a Stephon Castle, for example, and Jeremy Sohan, who has dealt with some injury throughout the season. Chris Paul, as that vet there, is fun too. Yeah, I feel like the Spurs have been doing some good stuff. I would love to see Wemby get into the playoffs. I'm just not quite sure if that's going to happen. And maybe that's the scarier outcome, because that potentially puts him in the spot to jump in the lottery and get like a Cooper Flag, which I pray with all my heart that he goes over to the Eastern Conference and especially does not go to the Spurs. And then we get to the tanking teams like the Blazers, who I don't have a lot to say about. Shout out to Scoot, just had one of the best games of his career. Holding on to my Scoot stock. Hopefully he can turn it around. I like Anthony Simons has been playing well as of late. Shane Sharp has been fun when he's been on the court. Klingon has dealt with injury, but he's also been fun. Denny Avdia has been playing great as of late. I like Tumuni Kamara. I think they're building something really cool over there in Portland. It's just going to take time. I think they'll be big players at the deadline. If they can move off of like a Jeremy Grant, maybe a DeAndre Ayton, maybe a Robert Williams, I'd like to see them go ahead and do that. The Jazz are tanking like crazy. Not a lot to say there. Like, it's been a down year for Lowry, who I think is kind of just chilling after getting a bag in the midst of a bad year of like some of the flashes from like Bryce Sensabaugh recently and Keontae George throughout the season. Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of waiting to see what happens with the Jazz. Walker Kessler has been awesome. And then there's the Pelicans, who are the worst team in the Western Conference. And I never would have guessed that coming into the season, even though I anticipated a lot of injuries and I had them kind of on the edge of the playoffs. I didn't think it would be this bad. They're one of the most injured teams I've ever seen. And recently, Zion returned, which is great, but Brandon Ingram is out with injury, and DeJounte Murray's been hurt a lot of the season. Herb Jones recently got hurt. I mean, at one point, they had Elfrid Payton playing basketball in the year 2024. And shout out to him, he had like a 20-plus assist game. But even still, they signed him, and he started for them that night. That's how injured they've been. And it's put them at the bottom of the standings, which honestly is maybe what they need. I think this team needs a reset of some sort, or maybe they just bring the top player. They land like a top 3 pick. They trade that for some improved talent. I don't know what it is, but they probably needed this reset year. I didn't like the roster construction coming to the season. I felt like it was wonky, that it wasn't going to work. At least now they have an excuse for it not working, and you get to see like a breakout year from Trey Murphy. Yves Missy's been really fun up there in Rookie of the Year conversations. It's just been such a weird like Twilight Zone type of year for the Pelicans, and I've got no idea where they go from here, but at least they might land one of the top picks in the draft. So that's the Western Conference. It is complete chaos, and it's going to continue to be that way because everybody is so close, and a lot of these teams cannot afford to miss the playoffs. The Suns can't. The Warriors really can't at this point. The Kings can't. The Wolves can't. The Mavericks can't. Like, those teams have to make it in there, and there are going to be at least 3 of those squads that don't. I think the Mavericks almost for sure make it because they'll get guys back healthy, but between like the Timberwolves and the Kings and the Warriors and the Suns, and if the Spurs push up, then another team misses. The Lakers, I don't think, are safe because they've, again, been very up and down. If they hit a cold streak, that's going to be a disaster for them. It's been wild. I didn't expect the Rockets and the Grizzlies to be as good as they are. Even as a Thunder fan, if you told me that Chet Holmgren missed this much time, I would have never told you that the Thunder are 33-6. It has been a crazy year in the Western Conference. It's going to continue to be that way, and it's been a lot of fun. So that's where we are right now, about halfway through the season. Let me know down below in the comments, what's been your favorite storyline in the West this season? If you're a fan of a West team, how'd you grade your squad so far up until this year? Who do you have coming out of the Western Conference? Is it the Thunder, or is there a team that can challenge them? And yeah, appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.